And we now cross over to the offices at the National Treasury, where the Cabinet Secretary, Professor Njuguna Ndung'u, is standing by with Faisal Ahmed, who is busy with the officials at the National Treasury. Faisal, good morning to you. From the PS and now to the Cabinet Secretary. And he definitely is the man of the hour. Some 4 hours before he heads to Parliament, what did he tell you?
Yes. Thank you very much, Ayub. Yes, you're right. We were with the Principal Secretary a few moments ago. Now we are with the Cabinet Secretary, the man of the hour. Professor, thank you very much for speaking to us. Just take us through what Kenyans should expect today.
Thank you very much. And that's a very difficult question to ask what Kenyans can expect. But let me say, the whole issue of budget process or budget making process is actually to come up with policies that are geared towards revitalizing the economy. And right now, the new administration has taken over taken over the economy, which has been really affected by multiple shocks. So in a sense, economic activity has been affected by multiple shocks. Cost of living has been rising. And there are so many other issues that are affecting us, especially coming from climate change. We have seen that food security and climate change has become very, very important, and that is what explains why cost of living, and especially for food, has become problematic. So the next question is, what kind of policy package is the government going to produce to make sure that they reflect what the economy is going to do, or how to drive the economy in the next period? That is essentially the process, the whole objective. So in a sense, then the next question is, what would Kenyans expect? The whole issue is that Kenyans expect to see the results of their consultation process. Where did we start? We started by developing a budget policy statement way back in March. That budget policy statement was actually a culmination of public participation. So what we presented to the National Assembly is the results of our own policy outturn and what we anticipate should be done, plus public participation. Then subsequently, the National Assembly also conducted its own public participation, especially now having even moving forward towards the policy propositions, the tax measures, the revenue measures, as well as the expenditure measures. So first of all, we have the expenditure measures, then we have the revenue measures, and then we deal with where do you raise that revenue. And again, Kenyans have made contributions in terms of that. So in a sense, what we are presenting is a culmination of what has been public participation, what has been the synthesis from our policy point of view, and what has the National Assembly specific committees, a budget and appropriation committee, as well as finance and planning committee, what they have also synthesized from the public and what we have synthesized together. So what you are saying is actually a synthesis of what the public has given us. The starting point is that we have laid down the propositions, we have asked for public participation. The next thing is we have presented it in Parliament after the synthesis. The Parliament has gone through a public participation and synthesized, and then we have sat together and said, this is the direction to take. So it means that what you see is a synthesized report. But what is the bottom line? The bottom line is, how do you turn around the economy? That is the bottom line. So the policy measures is, how do you turn around the economy? How do you make this economy inclusive in terms of its growth prospects? How do we create jobs for the youth? How do we lower the cost of living? And how do we create a momentum for future growth? That is the outturn of this, and that is the expectations. I think the most important thing is to understand that we're planning for the next 1 year, but we are providing adequate measures in terms of how we can sustain the momentum for growth so that we get an inclusive growth outcome. And that inclusive growth outcome means we are going to solve the problems where we started. This administration started with two extreme problems. The first one was financing constraints. You cannot finance development because you have no resources. And the second extreme is that you didn't have headroom for debt. So For us, we are actually saying, how do we resolve those two constraints? No headroom for debt. So in a sense, we have to ask ourselves, how do we raise domestic resources in a way that is going to sustain economic turnaround? Because economic turnaround is very, very important for everyone. The second thing is that once you achieve the turnaround, how do you create that momentum for sustainability? And that is also very, very important. So we look at short-term policies, we look at medium-term policies, and we look at long-term policies. And the long-term policies is to make sure that public policy works. That is poverty reduction. We have to create jobs for the youth. We have to make sure that the economy is sustainable in terms inclusive and sustainable. But more importantly, what has hit us very hard is the drought, which we haven't seen for the last 40 years. So the question we're asking ourselves is that how do we make sure that we don't have a repeat of that? So food security and climate change will become a focal point in terms of our planning. And that is what one of the things is to ask, what measures are we going to perfect in this case, so that food security and climate change becomes part of our core planning processes, but also investment. And that for us is very critical. That is the anticipation, but for us it cannot be summarized by one sentence. It is a whole raft of policies which are proposed, which are going to be implemented, and for sure what we are going to see is a resolve in terms of the short-term constraints that we have, but also create a momentum for
the constraints that the country is currently undergoing, the shocks that were there before. What you found in office when you came in. A lot of Kenyans have raised concerns about some of the measures that you've put in place to fund this budget. Maybe is there a balance where Kenyans can feel not constrained so that they can contribute more towards revenue collections and also balance the shocks that are already there?
All the measures that are going to be proposed will be justified and balanced. They have come from consultations. So we do not believe that there are measures that are not going to be balanced or justified. The most important thing is to ask ourselves, where are we going? We have to have some short-term sacrifices for us to achieve the long-term. That is an important component that you really need to worry about. If we want to get away from the constraints that we have faced in the last 1 year or so, then we have to sacrifice for that future. That is the important message I want to tell you. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Professor. That is Professor Njuguna Ndung'u, the National Treasury Cabinet Secretary, just taking us through what Kenyans should be expecting today. And later on in the day, he will be heading to Parliament to present the budget policy statement. And we will be giving you coverage on that as well. Back to you, Ayub.
Treasury officers of the Cabinet Secretary for the National Treasury, Professor Njuguna Ndung'u, who in under 4 hours' time will be at the National Assembly to read the budget, the first for the Kenya Kwanza administration, talking about what's needed for an economic turnaround, talking about the shocks that the economy had felt in the aftermath of the pandemic, and also measures, he said, related to tax revenue and expenditure by the government.